What if the only thing standing between you and the life you want is the way you behave today? Not your circumstances, not your past, not even your doubts, just your behavior. Because the world doesn't respond to your wishes. It responds to your identity. And identity isn't something you find. It's something you build, quietly, consistently, through action. You say you want clarity, confidence, discipline, success, but do you move like someone who already has it? Or are you waiting for permission to begin? The truth is, most people wait their entire lives for the right moment. When they finally feel ready, when the fear goes away, when the conditions are perfect. But that moment never comes. Because confidence isn't a precondition for action, it's the consequence of it. This is what the Stoics understood. That transformation doesn't begin in thought. It begins in practice. You don't become calm by thinking about peace. You become calm by breathing through chaos. You don't become wise by collecting ideas. You become wise by living them, again and again, until your nervous system begins to believe you. To act as if is not to lie, it's to align. It's to say, this is who I choose to be, not someday, not if everything works out, but now. Even when I'm afraid, even when no one's watching, even when there's no reward but self-respect. So in this episode, we explore what it really means to act as if, not as a performance, but as a philosophy, a way of turning desire into discipline, a way of living in such alignment with your future self, that eventually the future catches up. 1. Desire. Without identity is self-sabotage. You say you want it, the calm, the success, the discipline, the love, the respect. But who are you when no one is watching? Because if your actions contradict your desires, you're not moving toward your vision. You're quietly rejecting it. And that rejection doesn't happen through loud decisions. It happens through tiny misalignments, through hesitation, through showing up like someone who still doubts they deserve what they claim to want. Epictetus said it plainly, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Notice the order. You begin by defining who you are becoming, not by waiting for the world to approve of that identity, but by claiming it internally first. Then you act. Identity leads, action follows, results catch up. That's the path. But here's the trap most people fall into. They think desire alone is enough. They believe that because they want something, it's on its way. But wanting is easy. Wanting doesn't change you. Wanting can even keep you stuck, because it creates the illusion of movement without requiring any risk. And when your behaviors don't match your vision, your subconscious picks up on that gap. It sees the inconsistency, and the result is quiet, corrosive self-doubt. Think of it like this. Your mind is always watching, always listening. If you say, I want to be disciplined, but hit snooze every morning, your mind learns that your words are meaningless. If you say, I want to be respected, but let people violate your boundaries, your nervous system concludes that your needs don't matter. Slowly, quietly, belief erodes. Not because you failed, but because you didn't align. Desire is only powerful when it is coupled with identity, and identity is a decision, not a personality test, not a dream, not a label. It's a moment-by-moment commitment. Every action you take is a vote for the person you're becoming, and when you consistently vote against your vision, you become your own saboteur. This is why acting as if is so radical, because it says, I no longer wait to feel ready. I act now. in full alignment with my desired self, even when it feels unnatural, especially when it feels unnatural, because change is not comfortable, it's disruptive. It shakes the version of you that got used to playing small. So ask yourself right now, what do I claim to want? And do my behaviors reflect someone who already lives that truth? If not, what's the smallest action you can take today to close that gap? Not a performance, not for applause, but for alignment. Because the moment you act from identity, not insecurity, not fear, you stop sabotaging your future and you start stepping into it. 2. Your present action is a prophecy. What you do today isn't just shaping your future, it's predicting it. Most people misunderstand the power of action. They think of it as something reactive, a tool to fix problems or pursue goals. But in truth, action is a declaration. Every choice you make is a message to your subconscious, your future self, and the world around you. It says, "This is who I am. This is what I believe is possible for me." And once you start acting like someone who already has what they want, something strange happens. Reality begins to shift. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But thoughts, on their own, aren't enough. Thoughts must be backed by motion, by courage, by repetition. Otherwise, they remain dreams. Beautiful, but powerless. Here's the truth most people avoid. The future isn't something that just happens to you. It's something you construct, brick by brick, through your habits. Every time you choose to show up, especially when it's hard, you're laying the foundation for what you claim to want. And when you delay, doubt, or drift, you're doing the same, just in the opposite direction. Look at your life right now, not with shame, but with clarity. The way you speak, the way you carry yourself, how you start your mornings, how you respond to stress. It all adds up. It's not random. It's prophecy. If nothing changes, this is where you're headed. Not because of fate, but because of inertia. And that's either terrifying or empowering, depending on what you decide to do next. To act as if doesn't mean pretending. It means embodying. It means realizing that the discipline, clarity, confidence you're chasing doesn't appear out of nowhere. It shows up in the moments when you stop negotiating with your old self, when you stop just hoping and start behaving like it's already yours. Think of someone who has what you want, not materially, but energetically. Someone calm under pressure. Someone who walks into a room with quiet certainty. Someone who sets boundaries without guilt. Now ask yourself, what do they do differently? How do they carry themselves on an ordinary Tuesday morning? Then ask, what would it look like to do that now? This isn't about waiting for motivation. It's about stepping into alignment before the evidence appears. It's about training your mind and body to trust a new rhythm, one that's guided by purpose, not panic. Because action is not just movement, it's momentum, it's signal. And if you want a new life, you don't need to see the full path. You just need to take one step in the direction of who you already are becoming. So pause right here and ask yourself, what does my current behavior say about my future? And then ask, am I okay with that prophecy? If not, change the signal, change the action, and everything else will follow. 3. Acting as if isn't pretending, it's practicing. It's easy to hear act as if and think it means faking something, putting on a mask, pretending to be confident when you're scared, pretending to be focused when your mind is full of noise. But the truth is, acting as if isn't about deception, it's about direction. It's not performance, it's practice. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. That's not philosophy, that's neuroscience. Every time you show up and behave like the person you aspire to be, you're rewiring your brain. You're building emotional muscle memory. You're not lying to yourself. You're rehearsing a new identity until it becomes instinct. Think of an actor preparing for a role. At first, it feels unnatural. They stumble over lines, they second-guess the movements, they overthink everything, but over time, something shifts. They stop acting and start being. The same is true for you. If you want to be calm under pressure, you don't wait to feel calm. You breathe, slow your voice, ground your presence again and again, until calm is no longer an act. It's who you are. Most people wait until they feel ready to behave differently, but the feelings never come first. You don't feel confident before doing the scary thing. You feel confident after you've done it, repeatedly. That's the mistake, waiting for emotion to lead behavior. But in reality, emotion follows action. This is where "fake it till you make it" often gets misunderstood. It's not about being inauthentic. It's about training your nervous system to trust a new standard. If your identity is tied to anxiety, self-doubt, avoidance, then calm, clarity, and courage will always feel fake at first. But they're not fake, they're just unfamiliar. And the more you practice them, the more familiar they become. Imagine someone who wants to be a disciplined writer. They don't wait until inspiration strikes. They sit down every day, even when the words don't come, even when the page stays blank. That repetition is the transformation, not just of their work, but of themselves. They're not pretending to be a writer. They're becoming one through the discipline of showing up. You can apply this to anything: leadership, emotional control, patience, presence. You practice it in real time. You stumble, you adjust. And then one day, without realizing it, you are the thing you used to chase. Not because you forced it, but because you lived it. So ask yourself, what version of me am I waiting to feel before I act like them? And what would happen if I stopped waiting and started practicing? This is not a performance for the world. This is a quiet rehearsal for who you are becoming, not a mask, a mirror, not faking, forging. 4. The Stoic chooses to embody, not just to want. How many times have you said, "I want to be more disciplined," or "I wish I was calmer, more confident, less reactive," and yet your actions tell another story? You mean it. You want it. But wanting isn't enough. And no amount of wishing will ever bridge the gap between who you are and who you could be. Because in Stoic philosophy, the transformation of the self doesn't begin with intention. It begins with embodiment. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality," and those words cut deep when we realize how much of our suffering comes not from what's happening, but from who we're not becoming. We imagine who we could be. We feel the distance between where we are and where we want to go. But instead of stepping into action, we stay stuck in longing. We delay, overthink, procrastinate, not because we don't care, but because part of us is still waiting to feel ready. But readiness is a myth. You'll never feel completely ready to step into a higher version of yourself. Why? Because growth feels unnatural at first. Embodiment feels awkward when you've been living out of alignment for years. But the Stoic doesn't wait to feel aligned. He chooses alignment. He acts as if. Not out of delusion, but out of clarity. To embody something means to make it visible through behavior. It means your choices speak for your values. Your posture reflects your peace. Your tone carries your truth. The Stoic sage doesn't just know the right path, he walks it, quietly, daily, and even when no one's watching, because he understands that wisdom is not measured in theory, but in action under pressure. It's easy to admire a virtue. It's much harder to live it. It's easy to read a quote about resilience. It's much harder to hold your composure when you're under attack. It's easy to want courage. It's much harder to speak up when your voice shakes. But that's the difference between someone who merely wants and someone who becomes. The Stoic doesn't seek applause. He seeks integrity, not in front of others, but in the eyes of his own conscience. And this distinction matters, because there is a danger in being a collector of wisdom without ever applying it. It becomes performance. You know the words, you share the posts, you repeat the principles. But when life tests you, you fold, not because you're a hypocrite, but because you haven't yet embodied the philosophy, you haven't trained it. And in Stoicism, embodiment is a form of training. It's the gym for the soul. You don't become patient by reading Seneca. You become patient by pausing when you want to explode. You don't become courageous by memorizing quotes. You become courageous by showing up again and again in situations that scare you. So how do you move from wanting to embodying? It starts with small, consistent acts. You don't have to become the full version of your ideal self in one day, but you do have to behave in ways that align with that self every day. You set a boundary even when it feels uncomfortable. You wake up on time even when your body protests. You speak calmly even when your heart races. And in doing so, you begin to build trust, not just with others, but with yourself. Because the deepest form of self-respect doesn't come from what you say about yourself. It comes from who you choose to be, especially in moments of pressure, when your old self wants to react, and your new self quietly says, "Not today. I've outgrown this." Embodiment is the opposite of pretending. It's the truest form of becoming. It's living in such close alignment with your highest values that your presence alone becomes proof, not through words, but through energy, behavior, and consistency. So ask yourself, what do I want to be known for? Not in other people's minds, but in my own reflection. And then ask, what behavior today would make that identity real, even just 1 inch more than yesterday? The Stoic doesn't just want peace, he becomes peace in conflict. He doesn't just want virtue, he walks in virtue when the cost is high. And that's the invitation for you right now. Stop waiting to feel like the person you want to become, and start being them, quietly, repeatedly, with unshakable resolve. 5. Emotions follow action, not the other way around. We grow up believing the myth that we have to feel a certain way before we act, that we need to feel confident before we speak up, that we need to feel motivated before we start, that we need to feel calm before we respond with grace. But that belief is one of the biggest obstacles to real transformation, because emotions are not the leaders we think they are. More often than not, they're followers. William James, one of the founding voices of psychology, once said, "Act the part and you will become the part." He wasn't talking about faking it. He was pointing to a deeper truth about the nervous system, that your body leads your mind, that your actions shape your feelings, that if you want to change how you feel, you don't wait, you move. Think about fear. It tells you to freeze, to delay, to overthink, and most people obey it, assuming the feeling has to go away before they act. But what happens when you act anyway? when you pick up the phone while your hands are shaking, when you start writing even when you're full of doubt. What happens is this: the fear begins to shrink, not because it vanished, but because it was overridden by motion. This is the great paradox of growth. The emotion you seek is on the other side of the action you're avoiding. Confidence comes after showing up. Peace comes after standing firm in your values. Courage comes after moving through resistance. But you don't get to experience these gifts if you keep waiting to feel good first. The Stoics understood this. They didn't place their trust in emotion. They placed it in discipline, in behavior, in choice, because feelings are unstable. But principles, when embodied, create inner stability. You don't need to feel like it to do what matters. In fact, if you only act when you feel inspired, your progress will always be inconsistent. True power comes from doing the work, even when every emotion inside you is trying to stop you. That's when you build resilience. That's when you send a signal to your subconscious. I am no longer ruled by every passing feeling, and with time, your emotions begin to recalibrate. The more you act calm in chaos, the more your nervous system believes you are someone who is calm under pressure. The more you show up for your morning routine, the more your mind begins to expect discipline. Emotions follow repetition. They follow patterns. They are trained, not obeyed. Now ask yourself, what emotions are running my life right now? And what would change if I started acting from who I want to become, not what I feel in the moment? This doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. You acknowledge them, but you don't surrender to them. You pause, you breathe, and then you act anyway, aligned with your values, not your fear. Imagine someone who wants to become a speaker. They're terrified of public speaking. If they wait to feel confident, they'll stay silent for life. But the moment they speak, imperfectly, nervously, they open a door. And if they keep doing it again and again, confidence stops being a fantasy. It becomes embodied. And this principle applies to everything, to building discipline, healing from rejection, creating boundaries, showing up as a leader, or even finding joy. You don't wait for joy to show up. You do the things that generate it, small acts, repeated. So the next time you feel stuck, ask not, how do I get rid of this feeling? But rather, what would the best version of me do anyway? Then do it, not because you feel ready, but because your future depends on it. 6. Visualization is not enough without alignment. Close your eyes and picture the life you want. Maybe you've done this before. Imagined yourself stronger, calmer, more focused, more respected, more fulfilled. Maybe you've seen that version of yourself walking into a room with quiet confidence, moving through the world with intention, saying no without guilt, and waking up with clarity and purpose. That vision might feel real in the moment, but the truth is, without alignment, it will always stay a dream. Visualization has become popular, and for good reason. The brain responds to imagery. When you imagine success, your mind rehearses it. But the Stoics would have offered a caution: don't confuse imagining virtue with practicing it. Because dreaming about change without action is comfort, a silent performance. It feels productive, but it leaves you exactly where you started. Alan Watts once said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." That's the missing piece. It's not enough to think about transformation. You have to step into it with your body, your habits, your tone of voice, your posture, your decisions. Too often people visualize outcomes, success, peace, love, but continue behaving in ways that contradict those visions. You see yourself living with calm, but keep reacting impulsively. You dream of a strong body, but keep skipping the gym. You want financial peace, but ignore your spending habits. This gap between vision and behavior creates tension, because deep down, your nervous system knows the truth. You're dreaming it, but not living it. And the cost of that misalignment is subtle, but deadly. It erodes self-trust. Every time you imagine a better version of yourself, but choose actions that betray that vision, you weaken the bridge between who you are and who you could be. Alignment is what makes visualization powerful. When your thoughts, actions, and identity point in the same direction, momentum builds. You start to feel like you're not just chasing your future self, you're becoming them. Not through luck, but through congruence. So how do you align? You start small. You ask, if I already had the confidence I'm visualizing, how would I speak today? If I were already living with the discipline I admire, how would I structure this hour? If I truly believed I was worthy, how would I treat my body, my time, my space? And then you act accordingly, even if it feels unfamiliar. Especially if it feels unfamiliar, because alignment isn't about comfort, it's about integrity. Imagine a violinist visualizing a perfect performance, but never touching the instrument. The image is beautiful, but without practice, it's meaningless. The same is true for you. Your life is your instrument. Visualization is only the beginning. You must pick it up, tune it daily, and play, with presence, with imperfection, with commitment. And here's the shift. Don't visualize the result. Visualize the process. The discipline, the early mornings, the setbacks, the silence, the inner work. That's where the transformation happens. That's where the identity gets forged. So the next time you close your eyes and imagine a better life, ask yourself, am I aligned with this vision when my eyes are open? And if not, what small shift today can bring my actions closer to my dreams? Because you don't become the person you imagine. You become the person you embody. 7. Identity is a discipline, not a trait. We often speak of identity as if it's fixed, as if who we are is something we discover once, label, and then carry forever. But identity isn't found. It's forged, not in a single moment of clarity, but in countless moments of choice. Every decision you make is a brick in the structure of who you are becoming. And if that structure is weak, it's not because you lack potential. It's because you haven't yet learned that identity is not a trait. It's a discipline. Nietzsche said, "Become who you are." But he didn't mean that you already know who you are. He meant that becoming yourself is a process, an effort, a series of trials, refinements and repetitions. And that can be uncomfortable, because it demands that you stop waiting to feel like the person you want to be, and instead start acting like them before it feels natural. Most people think their identity is shaped by personality, history, or fate. But in Stoic thinking, none of those are limitations. They're raw material. It's not what you've inherited that defines you. It's what you do with it. You can have a past full of avoidance and still become someone who stands firm. You can be born into chaos and still choose serenity. You can grow up surrounded by weakness and still practice strength. Because identity is not about where you've been. It's about where you discipline yourself to go. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't obsess over self-discovery the way modern culture does. They focused on self-creation. Marcus Aurelius didn't write about finding himself. He wrote about shaping himself through reason, restraint, and repeated effort. He was emperor of the known world, yet he disciplined his identity like a student, because he knew that without discipline, power becomes chaos, just as without discipline, potential becomes regret. So how do you build identity through discipline? It begins with a simple but powerful question. Who would I be if I behaved as if my future depended on it? If you want to be disciplined, you start acting disciplined, not because it feels authentic, but because it's the only way authenticity is built. If you want to be wise, you start practicing restraint, not because it's easy, but because it's transformative. And over time, your nervous system adapts. Your mind begins to follow your behavior, and what felt like a costume becomes your character. Let's be honest, you already practice your identity every day. Every time you procrastinate, you're practicing the identity of someone who avoids. Every time you numb your discomfort, you're practicing the identity of someone who escapes. But the good news, practice goes both ways. You can interrupt the pattern, you can rewrite the code, not through dramatic declarations, but through quiet, repeated alignment. It's not about perfection, it's about consistency. Show up, stumble, realign, show up again. And in that rhythm, identity is born, not as a label, but as a lived truth. So next time you say, "This is just who I am," pause. Ask yourself, is it who I've disciplined myself to be, or who I've settled into by default? Because one leads to freedom, the other leads to frustration. You are not your habits, but your habits are how you become yourself. And that's the power you've always had. Not the power to be anyone instantly, but the power to become someone intentionally. Identity is not waiting to be discovered, it's waiting to be practiced. 8. The power of silent consistency. We live in a world obsessed with announcements. Every move is posted, every change is shared, every success is turned into a headline. But the Stoic understands something deeper, something quieter. True transformation doesn't make noise. It doesn't beg for recognition. It doesn't ask for applause. It just shows up again and again without needing to be seen. That's the power of silent consistency, the kind that builds unshakable character, not through attention, but through repetition. Lao Tzu wrote, "He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know." It's not about being mute. It's about understanding that wisdom isn't loud, power isn't performative, and growth is not a performance for others. It's an intimate contract you make with yourself, renewed daily, especially when no one's watching. Most people struggle to change, not because they lack the vision, but because they crave the validation. They want transformation, but they also want people to notice, to clap, to affirm. But when you rely on external recognition to stay consistent, you've already given your discipline away. You've made it dependent on noise, and the moment the applause fades, so does your effort. The Stoic takes a different route. He moves in silence, not out of secrecy, but out of strength. Because he knows that consistency isn't about momentum, it's about meaning. It's about showing up on the boring days, the tired days, the doubting days. It's about keeping a promise to your future self, even when your present self wants to quit. And this kind of consistency doesn't look impressive from the outside. It looks ordinary, like journaling for 5 minutes every morning, like choosing water over impulse, like saying no with calm conviction, like waking up early even when the bed begs you to stay. But over time, those small, quiet acts compound. They don't just change your habits, they change your identity. There's a reason the loudest people often burn out the fastest. Noise is energy, and energy burns quickly when it's not grounded. But silence, when rooted in purpose, endures. And that's what makes silent consistency so dangerous to the old version of you. It doesn't give up. It doesn't get distracted by praise or discouraged by failure. It simply continues. Imagine someone who trains every day without posting about it, who reads instead of arguing online, who heals without announcing their healing, who works quietly until their results speak louder than their words ever could. That's not a fantasy. That's what happens when consistency becomes part of your nature. So how do you begin? By dropping the need to impress, by shrinking the spotlight and expanding your commitment, by shifting your focus from being seen changing to actually changing, quietly, steadily, unshakably. Because there's a moment, and you'll feel it, when you stop needing to say, "I'm working on myself." You'll just become the result. And that version of you won't need to explain anything. So ask yourself, what would happen if I stopped talking about the change and just started being it? Every day, without applause, without validation, without noise. That's not weakness, that's power. 9. Let behavior lead the way. There comes a moment in every journey where you have to decide, will I keep waiting to feel ready, or will I act from the future I believe in? Most people try to think their way into change. They read, they reflect, they visualize, but at some point, reflection without motion becomes avoidance. And if you're not careful, you'll convince yourself that you're evolving, when really you're just intellectualizing your fear. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That one line is enough to dismantle every excuse, every plan, every good intention that's never been lived. Because the truth is, your identity doesn't form in your imagination. It forms in your behavior, in the tiny, unremarkable choices you make when no one is looking, in how you speak to yourself when things go wrong, in what you return to, not once, but daily. We like to believe that thoughts lead behavior, but behavior is often what reshapes thought. You don't wait to feel brave. You move through the fear, and your nervous system learns what bravery feels like. You don't wait to feel valuable. You act with self-respect, and your mind starts to believe you. It's a feedback loop. And the fastest way to shift how you feel is to shift how you act. Let's be honest, it's easier to plan than to practice, easier to overthink than to show up. But when you lead with behavior, you create a new pattern for your mind to follow. You give your brain evidence that something has changed. And slowly, the gap between who you were and who you're becoming begins to close. Imagine a person who wants to become peaceful. They don't wait until their environment is calm to begin. They train themselves to respond calmly in the chaos. They slow their voice when they're angry. They breathe deeply in traffic. They observe instead of react. These are not just techniques. They are acts of identity. Every repetition sends a message to the subconscious. This is who we are now. The same is true for discipline. You don't become disciplined through theory. You become disciplined by acting like someone who already is. Even when every part of you wants to quit, you keep the promise. You sit down to work. You say no to the easy way out. And your behavior, not your hope, not your talk, becomes your transformation. The Stoics didn't ask, "What do I feel like doing today?" They asked, "What does my nature, my highest self, demand of me today?" And then they acted, without complaint, without spectacle, because they understood this. Feelings come and go. But character is built by behavior. So if you're stuck, unsure, doubting, don't wait for clarity. Don't wait for motivation. Move. Do the thing. Start the habit. Take the action, even when it's messy, even when it's quiet. especially when it's uncomfortable, because in those moments, you're not just doing something hard, you're becoming someone new, and that's the ultimate power. When your behavior leads, your belief follows. So ask yourself right now, if I already were the person I want to become, what would I do today? Then go do it. 10. To act as if is to surrender control of outcome. We often act with a silent condition. I'll do this if it works. I'll show up if they notice. I'll stay consistent if the results come quickly. But this mindset is not discipline, it's negotiation. And as long as your actions are attached to specific outcomes, you're not acting from power. You're acting from fear, from control, from the illusion that you can manipulate the result if you just try hard enough. But Stoicism teaches something radically different. The path is yours, but the outcome is not. Epictetus wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And that's the heart of this final principle. To act as if you already have what you want is not a guarantee that you'll get it. It's a declaration that you're willing to live in alignment with that reality, even if the outcome never shows up. You're not acting to get. You're acting because that's who you've decided to be. That's real freedom. When your choices are no longer held hostage by results. When you go to the gym not to impress, but because strength is your standard. When you hold a boundary not to punish, but because dignity is non-negotiable. When you create, speak, build, love, not for the applause, but because not doing it would betray your own soul. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you shift from outcome attachment to identity alignment. You let go of the desperate grip. You release the fantasy of control, and you replace it with something stronger, self-respect. Because here's the truth, results are unpredictable. Markets crash, people change, circumstances shift. But who you become through the process, that's yours. That's what you carry. That's what no one can take. And when you focus on that, ironically, results often come faster. Not because you chased them harder, but because you stopped suffocating them with expectation. Think of an artist. The amateur creates for applause. The master creates from alignment. Not because they know it'll be a success, but because not creating would be a violation of their essence. That's the difference. One is performing, the other is embodying. So how do you live this? You let your behavior be a reflection of your identity, not your strategy for reward. You meditate not to become spiritual, but because clarity is who you are now. You forgive not because it guarantees healing, but because resentment doesn't fit your future. You take care of your body not because of how it looks, but because you've decided to be someone who respects the vessel that carries you. To act as if is to say, this is who I am, even if no one validates it, even if it's hard, even if the reward never comes, because the act itself is the reward, the discipline is the strength, the integrity is the prize. So ask yourself one final time, can I live the life I want? Not someday when the outcomes arrive, but now, in how I walk, think, speak, and choose. If the answer is yes, you've already won, not because the world gave you permission, but because you gave it to yourself. You don't become the person you want to be by waiting. You become them by acting, not once but every day, in silence, without guarantee, without applause. You act from the identity you've chosen, not the circumstances you're in. And that more than anything else is the mark of someone who is free. To act as if is not to lie, it's to align. It's to step into the future with such clarity, such quiet conviction, that even if the results take time, your integrity does not. You behave like the version of you who already lives the truth you believe in, calm, grounded, focused, disciplined, not someday, now, and the world. It begins to respond, slowly, subtly, not because you forced it, but because you became the kind of person it cannot ignore. The Stoics didn't ask for an easy life. They didn't chase outcomes or beg the universe for results. They simply lived, as if they were already the person they aspired to be. And in doing so, they became it. So here's the quiet truth you carry with you now. You don't have to feel ready. You don't need anyone's permission. You only need to act as if you already are. And if this episode sparked something in you, a thought, a decision, a new beginning, subscribe, share it with someone who's ready to hear this, and most importantly, start today. Live the truth, even before it arrives.